it's bigger than selling shoes. It's like really making an impact and making sure that our inner city neighborhoods are not forgotten as Detroit is growing and blowing up and there's this huge resurgence. When you think of Fahrenheit, just think of community and stay up to date. We have some exciting things coming, very, very exciting things coming on our social media, our website. So just please stay tapped in. If you need
That's
a pair
outstanding. What's the age range for the softball tournament?
It really, we try to go like at least, I mean, really is no age range. We've had kids like 7, 8 to grown men, grown women play. Like it's really all, which makes it fun. Like it feels professional because like the experience again looks like an MLB World Series, but anyone can play. It's just for fun. My nephew plays in it every year, so just come out and have a good time.
Great. So if someone wants to get involved with that, how do they do that?
Yep, it's the first thing you'll see on our website, Fahrenheit313.com. You'll see a big logo for Street Corner Classic. We also have a dedicated Instagram page for the Street Corner Classic charity softball tournament. So just follow that to stay up to date. But it's super fun, super exciting.
Excellent. It looks like we have a few questions from the audience participants.
Absolutely, and I'm going to go first. Fred, how are you, man?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good, man. I want to know your top 3 sellers. What are, as far as shoes, do you get more men, more women? Talk to me about the demographic, age groups, things like that.
Yeah, the demographic is, which was super surprising to me, but it's mostly the youngest kids, like 16, 17-year-olds who have more sneakers than the whole store had, in some instances. But it's just the younger kids who are really into the sneaker culture right now. And the top sellers shift from year to year. Right now, a lot of the top sellers are like Asics or New Balances. Before it was the Yeezys or the Retro Jordans, but now that's like totally shifted. And you're seeing kids wear more of like the Asics and things that weren't necessarily hot a few years ago. So it's constantly changing.
I think that's great. That means my shoes will come back in style.
It always
eventually.
Just hold on to them.
Absolutely. So it looks like you got Miss Peoples. Miss Peoples, you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Give us your question or your comment.
Hello, Fred. Thank you for all that you're doing for the community. I have a question. Now, you sell sneakers. Do you sell gym shoes? I still call them gym shoes. Is that the same thing, or is there a difference?
It's the same thing. Whatever word you use, we're talking about the same thing.
It's the same. I have never used sneakers or tennis shoes. I still say gym shoes. I guess I'm from the old school. Okay. So you do sell gym shoes, which are sneakers.
Yep.
Okay. Where are you located?
On the Avenue of Fashion, 20114. Livernois is right. It's closer to Trap Vegan or the Office Bar.
Now tell me something. Are you the store owner that cleaned gym shoes as well? There was somebody up there that was cleaning your gym shoes.
We do have a cleaner, but you might be thinking of Shoe Doctor, which is closer down the street, near like closer to 6 Mile. But we do clean as well.
Oh, okay, great. Okay, that was all I wanted to know, Fred. Thank you so much for all once again.
No problem. Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Ms. Peoples. Fred, we got 2 questions. One question is, do you offer shoe repair, refurbish, or anything like that?
So not necessarily repair, but we just do deep clean. So if you and it's like sometimes night and day. Like we'll bring them back to life in that aspect, but we're not re-gluing or basically re-gluing is where we stop. But if you have like just a dirty pair that's scuffed up and things like that, we can bring them back to life, but just no re-gluing.
Okay, and how much does that usually cost?
$30 a pair.
Okay, Tanisha, I'm sorry.
That was my question. And how long does it typically take?
Well, if you drop them off early enough, like before 11, they'll be done the same day. But typically it's like 48-hour waiting period, not too long.
You need an appointment for that?
Yes, the appointments are online as well.
Awesome. I am coming there. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. What about, someone also asked Fred about the seller experience. You talked about not just buying shoes, but someone coming up there to actually sell their gym shoes. So talk about that for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's how we got most of our inventory is just directly from the community. So putting money right back into the community, which was huge for me as well. But you come into the store with whatever you're trying to sell, whether it's a brand new pair of sneakers or a pre-owned pair, and we'll start by authenticating and then giving you an appraisal with what we value the sneaker at, looking at things like StockX, what they're selling for online, but also what we think we could sell them for in store based on the condition and, you know, those other factors as well. And then we'll make you an offer, either cash or store credit. Store credit is usually a little bit higher just because cash is king. But you'll get an offer for store credit or cash. You can choose to get the cash or use the store credit to get a new pair of kicks.
That's excellent, man. Thank you so much. Tanisha, we got any more questions?
I think I am all set. Any more questions in the chat?
Nothing so far, but Fred, we thoroughly appreciate you, man.
Absolutely. Want to thank you so much. We know you're a busy man. I will be there definitely. I'll be bringing my shoes up there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And please let us know about the events coming up. I know you do some very cool things in the community. And so we know that you could have your business anywhere, but we're grateful that you chose the city of Detroit to do it, and specifically District 2. I'm a little bit biased. Thank you so much. But I'm glad you're here. And so thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fred. It was a pleasure, man. And so, again, Tanisha, thank you for bringing on these great businesses. Sean at Pink Poodle and Fred at Fahrenheit 313. What amazing businesses that we have in the city of Detroit. People that are finding niches and great things they're offering to our residents. And so, again, we want to admonish you all to patronize these businesses, support them. And like Tanisha said, they chose to stay here in the city of Detroit. They could have went anywhere. They went through the process. And as an administration, we're supporting them wholeheartedly. And we have their back. So thank you all so much, again, for your presentations.
Thank you, Josh.
Absolutely. We're going to move on and transition to our next presentation. I have Ms. Nicole Wise here from the HRD team, and she's going to give us a great presentation about how we're going to be spending some money we received. So we want you all to be attentive, and we'll wait until the end of her presentation to have questions. We also have, for your questions, subject matter experts here that she will pivot to if she needs to answer your questions. So don't be afraid to ask those questions, okay? Thank you, Nicole. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Josh, and thank you to all of you who joined us this evening to talk about disaster recovery. Before we get started, I want to introduce myself. I'm Nicole Wise, and I work for the Housing and Revitalization Department. HRD oversees and implements all of the HUD funding that comes from HUD. So you'll see us very active with the HUD funding. But we do have a lot of partners, at least for this funding, on the call. And so I'd like for folks to just come on very quickly and introduce yourself and which department you're from, all of the partners for this specific grant. And if I could have HRD folks start first. Do we have Julie Schneider on, our director? Let's start with Julie.
Yeah, can you see me, Nicole?
Yes.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. I'm Julie Schneider. I'm the director of the Housing and Revitalization Department, and I appreciate everybody joining us this evening.
Thank you. And LaShawn?
Good evening, everyone. My name is LaShawn Turner. I am the Executive Project and Implementation Manager in the Housing and Revitalization Department.
Thank you. Can I get DHC, someone from DHC?
Tyler Hardy, Senior Director of Real Estate Development at Detroit Housing Commission.
Thanks, Tyler. Is Arthur on? Arthur, if you want to introduce yourself. Okay, no worries.
Yes, I am. Sorry about that. I am on. Arthur Jemison, right here. Good to see everyone.
Thank you, Arthur. Our DWSD partners, I think I've seen Sam Smalley on.
Hi, Sam Smalley, Deputy Director, Detroit Water and Sewage Department.
And Sam, do you have any other DWSD folks for co-host on?
I saw Brian Peckinpah. I think he was a co-host.
Brian.
Yeah, good evening, Brian Peckinpah, Detroit Water and Sewage Department.
Thanks, Brian. Ken, I will turn it to you. Introduce yourself.
Hi, Ken Kusel. I'm an engineer in the mayor's office, and I'm focusing on the Jefferson Chalmers project.
Thanks, Ken. And then Ron?
Hey, good evening, everyone. Ron Brundage, Director of the Department of Public Works.
Perfect. Thank you guys for introducing yourselves. So wanted to, and I'm sorry, did I miss anybody before I move on? Okay. Thank you all so much. So wanted to just highlight again that we have multiple subject matter experts in the room to answer your questions. But the purpose of our meeting today is to really go through the proposed activities that we have for the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds that we received for the August 2023 presidentially declared disaster. Most of you may already be familiar with the 95 million we received for the 2021 disaster. And some of you may even remember that storm more so than you remember the 2023 storm. But we're gonna get into how we received and why we received this funding. So again, just wanna reiterate that the purpose of tonight's meeting is really to go over the proposed use of the $346 million allocated towards community development block grant disaster recovery, and want to turn it over to LaShawn Turner. She is going to start off by giving you all a background on how and why we received the funds. And she's also going to talk to you all about some of the regulations and data that we have to use in order to make the decisions on the best use of these funds. So LaShawn, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Nicole. So as Nicole mentioned, we going to do some high-level overviews about this funding. So for starters, sometimes Congress appropriates CDBG-DR. That's the acronym, but the full name is Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery, funding towards presidentially declared disasters. From there, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, determines a dollar amount and awards those funds to grantees with eligible disasters. In this case, a grantee is the city of Detroit. From there, the city of Detroit has 90 days to submit an action plan to HUD proposing how we plan to use these funds. And that's actually exactly where we are in the process right now. HUD will then have 45 days to review our action plan, and then the city of Detroit, through the Housing and Revitalization Department, implements the plan that we submitted to HUD. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the disaster response timeline. So a disaster happens and we immediately go into this immediate response phase. The federal administration declares it a disaster, and then FEMA and other agencies on the ground may take immediate response efforts like rescuing people or providing safety and shelter to them. And then we move into this initial recovery phase. And in that phase, the federal government begins to assess the damage alongside the state and local governments and even with the insurance companies. And when they're looking at this data, they're looking at the FEMA aid that people got, which could be individual assistance or public assistance from state and local governments, and even some SBA loans. And with that data, they're able to estimate the unmet recovery need that is used to give that information to Congress. And then this next phase, the long-term recovery phase, there are some instances, like I mentioned before, where Congress will give these CDBG-DR funds to communities who experience a disaster. And recovery is defined as restoring housing, infrastructure, and in our economies back to what it was like before this disaster occurred. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background on this disaster that we experienced in 2023. It happened August 24th through August 26th. In 2023, Detroit and surrounding counties experienced severe storms and flooding. In February of 2024, FEMA announced that a disaster declaration was approved for the city of Detroit. And then in December of 2024, Congress approved $12 billion in CDBG-DR funding for those disasters that occurred in 2023 and 2024. Next slide, please. So how is HUD calculating these unmet needs? What they're doing is they're taking a look at the total damage that was assessed by FEMA, looking at the total impact of the storm and putting it in dollars. And then they are subtracting the funding we already received. So like this FEMA public assistance or individual assistance or the SBA loans that I've been mentioning. The difference between the damage assessed and the relief that we already received is going to give us the balance of a total unmet need. And that is how they determined us getting $346 million for that August 23 disaster. Like Nicole mentioned, you may be more familiar with the disaster that occurred in 2021, and you may be thinking, well, we received less money for that disaster. Well, for the 2023 disaster, the city did not receive any FEMA public assistance, and we believe that was the main driver of why this allocation was so large for us this time. So in our action plan, we took the time out to identify some unmet needs. We identified $32 billion in unmet needs. For our housing unmet needs, we identified $30 billion. For infrastructure unmet needs, we identified $2.4 billion. And this was based on local data and pre-existing conditions exacerbated by the disaster. It also includes mitigation projects. The economic development unmet needs are unknown at this time, but when we do receive that information, if it does become available, we'll absolutely update it in our action plan. I also, nope, that's it. That's all we need for that one. Thank you. So eligible uses. The eligible activities that we can use for this funding is housing, infrastructure, and economic development. With those eligible activities, we also have to meet a national objective. So the national objectives can be low to moderate income households at or below 80% AMI. It can be slum and blight, or it can be urgent need. For slum and blight, we don't believe the impact from that 2023 disaster will qualify for the national objective. And then for urgent need, the timeline for us to use that national objective is coming close to an end soon. So we're going with low to moderate income households. There also has to be a tie back to the disaster. Tiebacks can be direct or they can be indirect. So an example of a direct tieback would be if a tornado hit the city and your roof was blown off from that incident, we would replace the roof. That's a direct tieback. An indirect tieback would be something like what we did with our 2021 disaster. We have the private sewer repair program. And while the infrastructure itself didn't cause the flooding, the condition of our sewer laterals exacerbated the basement flooding that we experienced. That was an indirect tieback that we did there. Then there's also the duplication of benefits. The key thing here is that with this funding, the CDBG-DR funding has to be the last source of funding that we used. So say for instance, when your roof came off from that tornado that occurred and you have homeowners insurance to replace the roof, then we can't use CDBG-DR for that. We would have to use your homeowners insurance first. Or if the city received some FEMA funds to go ahead and do that, those laterals in the city, then we would not be able to use the CDBG-DR funds. We would use the FEMA funds first. So the proposed use for these CDBG-DR funds, we took a look at the unmet needs and regulations, and we are proposing the following for these activities for CDBG-DR. For infrastructure, we're proposing $252 million. For housing, $75 million. For administration, $17.3 million. And for planning, $2 million. I do want to add a note that for our planning, you could go back one slide, please. For our, for our administration, there is a 5% cap. We cannot go over, so that's how we got the 17.3 million. And also, even though the unmet need shows housing as significantly larger than the unmet need for infrastructure, The proposed infrastructure activities will protect our housing from flooding. So that's why we allocated more dollars into the infrastructure pot. And now I'm gonna pass it back over to Nicole. She's gonna go over the proposed activities.
Thank you so much, LaShawn. So now we're going to go into the individual activities proposed underneath those larger buckets of infrastructure and housing. So while our disasters definitely lead to many unforeseen circumstances, our housing needs really predate our disasters. So we already had older housing. We've had increasingly higher rent rates and cost burdens for Detroit households. And so the scale of these housing challenges related to these disasters exacerbates that need. And so one of the things that we're proposing to use our funding for is to continue to fund affordable rental housing and public housing projects. At this time, we have not identified specific rental housing projects that will be determined through a notice of funding availability overseen by HRD. But the Detroit Housing Commission has identified public housing projects, including Brewster Homes, Smith Homes, Diggs Forest Park, and Sojourner Truth, to help bring on more affordable housing for our residents. Next slide, please. In addition to that, we are proposing a down payment assistance program, again, to meet some of those unmet needs around homeownership that are, again, exacerbated when we are impacted by disasters. That will be up to $25,000 in down payment assistance for qualifying low mod income households. Next slide, please. During the storms, the last two storms specifically, we have found that our homeless shelters are also impacted by the storms and by the flooding. And so the proposed use of, for some of our infrastructure programs, which HUD identifies these as infrastructure programs, but you may think of them as a housing program, we would be providing some assistance to homeless shelters so that they may apply for rehabilitation assistance to help respond to and or prevent future impacts. So in this most recent storm, we did see shelters come offline due to flooding and reduce the amount of shelter beds available to our residents. Shelters must be owned by a nonprofit organization, open to the public, and receive referrals through the CAM. And that information, if approved, will be released later on in a notice of funding availability. Next slide, please. Up next, we have a large-scale green stormwater infrastructure project in the Brightmoor neighborhood. And this large-scale project captures stormwater runoff from a much larger area and would provide a benefit to multiple tributaries along the river rather than just localized areas. Why did we choose the Brightmoor neighborhood? A lot of it had to do with topography, its proximity to the Rouge River, and there's combined sewer overflows. So next slide, please. So you'll see here, this is the outline in orange is the grant fund, the proposed area for this project in the Brightmoor neighborhood. Next slide, please. Most of you may be familiar with the current program from the 2021 storm, the private sewer repair program. That program has offered grants to eligible eligible households who were impacted by the storm. And as a result, that funding is used to help repair the sewer lateral connection to the public side, the public main sewer line. That program does require a significant amount of paperwork on behalf of the household. It also requires the household to show and demonstrate they were impacted directly by the storm. And it requires a lot of pictures, quotes to contractors. They also have to provide their income documentation. And so this program we are proposing to do would take away that burden on homeowners and move the repairs to the public side of the alleyway. And so we are proposing what is now being called the Sewer Alley Repair Program. So Detroit has about 1,800 miles of alley sewers that connect homes to the main sewer lines. And most of them were installed 70 to 90 years ago. So they're pretty antiquated. Next slide, please. And after nearly a century of neglect, you'll see that these sewers can collapse. And some of you may have already been experiencing sinkholes in the alleys. Next slide, please. So the private sewer laterals in many cases have outlived their useful life and have started collapsing or falling off from the public sewer, again, leading to basement backups and causing alley sinkholes. There were about 5,000 homes impacted in 2023 per FEMA data. And moving the program to the public side, we believe that we could serve about 12,000 households instead. And also DWSD is proposing that every district will benefit from the program. And they've committed to working with City Council to understand the needs and identify projects within each district. You can see here, this image is going to help you understand what the program will do. You'll see the we own versus you own. And that was where the private sewer connection with the city sewer happens. And so majority of those private sewer connections in our neighborhoods are in the alley. And so this program would help reconnect them to the public sewer so we can help continue to reduce basement backups. Next slide, please. The next infrastructure program being proposed is the Stop Log Flood Mitigation Project in the Jefferson Chalmers neighborhood. There's about 2,771 parcels in the floodplain right now in Jefferson Chalmers. About 366 of those are on the river or canals, and it impacts about 5,500 people. So the city is proposing that we would install permanent fixtures for temporary stop logs to keep floodwater and Detroit River water out of the sewer system and adjacent properties. This is different than the 2022 Army Corps Floodplain Management Study report, which recommended 2 permanent canal closures and 1 stop log. Right here, we are proposing 3 stop logs and no permanent canal closures with the DR funds. So the hope is this the proposed project will provide a permanent fixture to aid in the removal of the floodplain designation in Jefferson Chalmers and surrounding neighborhoods. And you can see here where those 3 stop logs are being proposed to be installed. Next slide, please. So here you'll see a close-up of expected work elements to resolve both the overland flooding and floodplain designation issues. Note that the concept of the temporary closure of canals for flood control purposes is again recognized by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in their July 2022 flood risk, and you can find a link to that documentation in our action plan. It is fully acknowledged by all of the parties that possible discharge from the Fox Creek combined sewer by Gliwa into the Fox Creek open channel while stop logs are in place. I just want to repeat that. It is fully acknowledged by all parties that possible discharge of the Fox Creek combined sewer by Gliwa into the Fox Creek open channel while stop logs are in place and is a subject that must be addressed with this proposed project. Additionally, possible stagnation of the canals while the stop logs are in place will be addressed with this project. Next slide, please. Our final project being proposed is the traffic signal connectivity and backup program. So in 2024, we had about 2,400 reported signal malfunctions and 239 power outages. So to mitigate this future negative impact during storms, DPW is proposing to, 1, install generator connector switches to all of the 819 city jurisdiction traffic signals, and we'll talk about where the DR funds will be used for those. Install UPS battery backup at 40 plus high traffic volume intersections in the city, and we'll provide that list to you all as well. And connect 230 currently unconnected traffic signals to the traffic management center. You can see here a picture of the transfer switch and portable generator at the top for your reference, and then the UPS cabinet below. Next slide, please. So again, there are 819 signals, and 589 of those are currently connected to the traffic management center. So what we would do is use the disaster recovery funds to upgrade and connect the remaining 230 signals to the network. This would allow the traffic management center to see and manage signal operations in real time, which is super important during storms, so that we can prevent any safety issues related to power outages. The ability to receive that real-time malfunction, again, and outage alerts would come from this project, and then quicker responses to malfunctions and outages from the traffic management system. Currently, TMC is currently relying on being told a light is out. So as a resident, you're making a call and you're saying that this light is out. And this would actually allow the TMC to see it in real time. Next slide, please. And then for the UPS battery backup systems, this is where they're being planned to be installed. You can see the little dots here and then a list of the intersections for that proposed activity. Next slide, please. So here we provided a breakout by category and then by project for your reference. You'll see the 75 million. We talked about the affordable housing, public housing, and homeownership opportunities for down payment assistance. And then the infrastructure, the largest being the sewer alley repair program, which is about, I think, 60% of our funding. And then public facility rehab for homeless shelters, stormwater improvement projects, and traffic signal connectivity and backup, and Jefferson Chalmers stop log flood mitigation project. Next slide, please. So what are the next steps now that you've received the proposed activities? So one, we'll collect verbal feedback today at the end of this hearing. There will also be a public hearing next Monday at 5 o'clock for anybody who has missed this or wanted to attend again after reading the action plan. We will take public comments until Friday, March 28th at 5 p.m. Those can be provided again publicly during these public hearings. They can be provided by email. And in our action plan, if you need accommodations to provide verbal feedback via phone, that can be found in the action plan as well. Once that's done, as LaShawn mentioned earlier, we will submit this action plan to HUD for approval. And once we get approval from HUD, the Detroit City Council will accept and appropriate the funding. Next slide, please.
I think that's it, Nicole.
Oh, okay. So I think before we take public comment, Josh, can we have anybody from any of our partners, if there's anything else you'd like to provide clarity on, I'd like to provide the opportunity for you to come on camera and off mute to provide that at this time.
Sam, did you have something to say?
Not yet. Nicole did such a great job. I'll wait for questions.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Nicole, so much for your presentation. We definitely appreciate it. Very thorough. I just wanted to kind of give a quick overview. So it sounds like we are pumping money into our down payment assistance program. Recently, we turned probably 400 renters into homeowners, and so we're continuing that work. We're also putting money into our infrastructure and our alleys and our sewer lines in the alleys so we can affect more households. And we're also trying to get 2 neighborhoods over the hump where the city of Detroit has already made investment into Jefferson Chalmers in the Brightmoor area. And so we're also backing up our traffic lights as well. So if the power goes out, like many years ago, we've all experienced that. No one will be getting into accidents. We'll be able to still continue on safely. And so right now, I want to encourage you all, if you have a question or a comment, please raise your hand or you can put it in the chat. I'm going to give you a couple of rules of engagement. If you have a question, you can ask your question, and then I'm going to allow you to give a follow-up question if need be, because you might need some clarity on something. But for the benefit of brevity and to respect everyone's time, I want to limit you all to 2 questions per person. If you don't have 2 questions, we'll gladly take your comment or your question. So I'm going to start off with Mr. Denzel Early. Mr. Early, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, give us your question or your comment. right, looks like Mr. Early might have lowered his hand. Okay, we're gonna go to Ash H. John. Go ahead and unmute yourself, give us your question or your comment. If you're speaking at this moment, we can't hear you. Ash H. John, you look like you are unmuted. You can go ahead and give us your question or your comment. All right, we're going to move on. Mr. James Jackson Jr., you can go ahead and unmute yourself. Give us your question or your comment.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
My name is James Jackson. I'm with Jeff Chalmers Citizen District Council. Some 12 or 13 years ago, I was part of the crew that built the new pumping plant at Connor and Frood. At that time, the Army Corps of Engineers came in and took us to school on the geographics of this area. This area was built over swamp. From Essex to the river was swamp. Okay. What we have underground is we have 3 or 4 creeks that run underground. They're all connected to the Connor Creek and the Fox Creek ecosystem. Okay. If you block up some of the big creeks on top, you're going to cause the smaller creeks down below that you can't see to swell up and have more water in them. Right now, we have folks out here that have water running up under their homes. It's been that way for years. Many of them can hear and see the water, okay? If you block up those bigger creeks up on top, you're gonna swell up those smaller creeks, and in turn, you're probably gonna ruin quite a few people's foundations around their homes, okay? Now, you can check with the Army Corps of Engineers. They took us to school on this stuff. That's been 12 or 13 years ago, and I don't believe any of that stuff has changed. Okay?
So, Mr. Jackson, I'm going to pivot to Mr. Ken Kusel, who I believe is the subject matter expert on this, and he could comment on your comments, okay? Go ahead, Ken.
Yep. Yeah, we do have the Army Corps study that was done in 2005. As well as their latest FPMS reports. And while I don't recall any mention of underground creeks as part of our preliminary engineering for this proposed project, we'll be doing extensive survey and historical reviews on the watersheds.
Thank you, Ken, so much. Miss LaTanya Pitts, how are you? Go ahead, unmute yourself. Give us your question or your comment.
Hi, how is everybody doing this evening? My question is 2 parts. I know these are federal funds. I'm currently a federal employee, so with all the high things that are going on right now, budget talks for this is going on this week for them to decide on the budget. Is this money already allocated, or does it have to be voted on with the current administration? And the second one is, when it comes down to the alleyways, who are going to benefit first? Which departments or different people? Because I'm in the Petoskey Otsego Association, and I'm off of Grand River in the Boulevard area. So that's what I want to know. How is this going to affect, and how is it going to be prioritized? Who gets the first service for it? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pitts. Nicole, can't hear you.
You can't hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. You're good.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Ms. Pitts, for that comment. So to answer your question, the funding that was appropriated to us was appropriated in December of 2024 by Congress. So the money's already been appropriated. However, we are trying to move as quickly as possible to get the action plan in to HUD so that we can get an actual signed grant agreement so we can move forward with the funding. So hope that answers your first question. I know that for your second question, you had asked about the sewer alley repair program. Right now, and Sam, please let me know if I misspeak. But right now, DWSD's plan is to work with each city council district to determine which areas they'll begin serving first for that program. So Sam, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else to
Thank you, Nicole. There are income requirements or limitations as to which neighborhoods we go to. We have over 30,000 data points showing where these failed lateral connections are. We know that there's a lot more. We will be able to run a camera through a sewer. If we don't have that data point, while we're there, we'll be able to pick it up. So we have the outline of a plan, but we did commit to council that we would work with each council member prior to executing the final plan.
Thanks so much, Sam. And so I just want to encourage everyone to be civically engaged and definitely talk to your individual council members and let them know what your issues are in your neighborhood. But again, thank you, Ms. Pitts. Dolores Shepherd, we're going to ask you to unmute yourself, give us your question or your comment, please.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my question. I'm on the corner of Nottingham and Linville, and I am on my 13th flood, even as we speak right now. From it started happening in 2021, and no matter what's going on, I'm still getting. Every time it rains now, every time it clouds up, my basement with all the poop on the east side of Detroit comes into my basement. Who can help me?
Well, Ms. Shepherd, it sounds like you're in the right place. So what I want to encourage you to do, we want to take your information now. If you would be so kind to put that in the chat. You do have a district manager. I believe it sounds like you're on District 4. I think you mentioned Nottingham.
Yes.
And so we're going to take your information and connect you to the proper people. You have the water department on here now. And then I also want to encourage you to definitely patronize a private plumber so we can work together with that person and see what the issue is so we can get you a permanent resolution. Sam, do you have anything to add?
Yes, we have an existing program for those that are income qualified under CDBG-DR from the 21 storm. It's called the Private Sewer Repair Program. I would highly encourage anyone who's having sewer issues to go to HRD's website where more information can be found about the program that we have going right now.
Thank you so much, Sam. Appreciate that. Candace Rucker, you can go ahead and mute yourself, give us your question or your comment.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you so much for the presentation. I see that you said you were allocating $75 million to affordable housing, in which you've already identified some of those funds to go to DHC public housing. So how much of that funding is going to the housing projects that you've already identified, and what's going to be left over?
Yes, thank you for your question. Actually, Josh, if we could go back a slide or two, I think it's the previous slide. You can see here the breakdown of the housing. So the public housing is estimated to be at 31 million. And then the remaining budget is 34 million for affordable housing and 10 million for down payments.
Candace, was that it? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, so with the $31,000 going towards the public housing, like what is that doing? Is that for improvements to the house? Is that for vouchers? What is that money actually going to do? How is it you guys going to utilize it?
That's a great question. And Tyler, please let me know if I misspeak. But the goal here is to to ensure that all of the existing public housing units that are owned by the Detroit Housing Commission are rehabilitated and available for rent. Tyler, I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, no, I think that sums it up. The money will be allocated towards the projects that we've identified to be able to address, deferred maintenance and capital repairs. And so really just being able to bring additional units online in those sites.
Thank you, guys. Moving right along, Miss Vanessa Riley, you can go ahead and mute yourself. Vanessa Riley Bates, give us your question or your comment.
actually Terry Swafford, her husband. I've got a couple questions here. Number one, with the sewer repairs, are you splitting the pipes into two-pipe system? Because that's the issue. Our sewers and our stormwater drains are combined outside of our homes. So then if we've got a large downpour and the city can't handle it with the pumping stations failing, we get sewage mixed in with that and it gets into our basements. That's the cause of our flooding. The catch basins of the street can't keep up with this and they flood the streets with the sewage. It's not coming from the perimeter of the canals. The canals have a seawall issue, which is separate. And if this money isn't going to repairing the seawalls, you're missing the point. The next question is about the stop logs. What's the point of that if it's temporary? What are you trying to accomplish with that? Are you repairing the seawalls? Because at that number, you could repair 366 houses, seawalls for $11 million. So that's the math. You've got $20 million allocated for that. The parks never flood. Their seawalls are tall enough. They're not tall enough on the canals. You guys are missing the point again. You brought this up several years ago, and it's wrong again.
All right. So, Ken, are you available to answer that?
Yeah, so the stop plugs would only be installed during times of high Great Lakes levels where the water is overtopping the canals and getting into the local and regional sewage systems. That's the only time they would be installed. So might be a few months out of a year, every 10 years or so has been the rough cyclical nature of that. But that is the intent, is just for those, as well as to, along with the other improvements that we had mentioned, get the city out of floodplain designation.
Thank you so much. Miss Anita Smith, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, give us your question or your comment.
Good afternoon. I'd like to know, with the stormwater improvement and sewer alley repair proposals, are those in addition to GLEWA? Or are these outside of GLEWA?
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Sam?
Yes, the sewer alley repair is definitely a DWSD HRD project, so that is completely separate from the Great Lakes Water Authority. The Brightmoor Stormwater Project is also outside of the Great Lakes Water Authority. However, we may be able to get additional assistance from GLEWA because we are reducing the amount of stormwater into the system, helping to reduce CSOs and providing additional capacity for larger storms within the system. So they're both separate for the most part.
Thanks, Sam. Denzel Early, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, give us your question or your comment.
Olito Chama Wengapa. I have two questions, but the first thing I want to do is recommend American Water Resources Program to the person who was having problems with the flooding in the basement. You can get them for like $7 a month, and they'll come out with a service fee at a negotiable price, and they'll work on that sewage line. The first question that I have is what are the long-term recovery plans for those on the city's repair program where unmet needs exceed like $25K at a low interest option for those who have homes that only appraise at $90K? My second question is how can residents continue to use like gold investments, to better the liquidity of the Detroit's economy? And that's all I want to say. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Anyone able to answer his questions?
Repeat the first question.
Let me try to find him again.
I'm here.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Basically, I want to know, like, for those who are on the home repair program through the city of Detroit, I noticed, like, because I'm in that program right now, and, the things that I need done on my house, they exceed $25K. So, like, even when the contractors get done, it's some things that's still going to be lingering around that's not going to be fixed. So I want to know, like, what is the precaution that I should take in order to get those projects done to prevent disasters?
Are you a participant for the 0% interest home loan? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. So if you are still, so this funding specifically is only for, it can only address needs tied to the specific disaster for which it was approved for. So we can't go in and do this funding would not be the funding to address your existing conditions for your house unless, of course, the flood caused that condition. But if you, and I don't know, Julie, if you had any further thoughts on this, but for 0%, I don't know if have some other resources we could refer him to.
I'd ask I believe it was Mr. Early, if you could put your information in the chat, and we can follow up with you to identify if there's other resources that can assist you. And we can also have one of our inspectors talk through with you the kind of what a prioritization might be like for the repairs needed in your house.
Thanks, Julie. Miss Allison Hears, I believe that's how you pronounce your name. Please forgive me. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, give us your question or your comment.
Hi, I just want to have an understanding of like perspective, right? So I'm a Jefferson Chalmers resident, and obviously we're all very, worried and would very much prefer for our canals to not be, for the nature in which we enjoy them to not be altered. And so I see, two things going on, right? There's obviously all of the talk about, the need to separate stormwater from wastewater. I know Grosse Pointe's doing a lot of that work. And as a resident, my experience of flooding has been more from sewer backups than anything over land, right? And so are we looking at, is like the funding around the stop logs and like the desire to do that project, is it more aimed at trying to, is seen as the simplest way to get this zone of the city out of the flood map and therefore make available affordable housing funds via federal grants? And is that somewhat separate from the overall greater, concern of overland flooding? Because to, hearken to a previous resident's comment about the fact that like, working with seawalls and spending money on seawalls and giving people assistance related to seawalls could potentially also take us out of the floodplain. And then I think I just want to reiterate that I think as Jefferson Chalmers residents, our, main concern is that although the stop logs are deemed as temporary and only during like levels of, high levels, et cetera, I haven't seen any details around like how, when it would be decided those would be put in, what authority we'd be putting them in and taking them out. What power do we have as a community if they end up being stuck in for a lot longer than, what is actually necessary via the water level? And I think if there was clarification on that, there might be more receptivity in people directly near the canals.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of detail that still has to be worked out regarding the operation of the whole system. This was we're still at concept level regarding a lot of the details. I will say that this program is probably one of the most expedient to get relief from the floodplain designation, since the stop logs would be owned, operated, and maintained by the city, or we wouldn't have to worry about private folks keeping up their seawalls, and we could present an argument to FEMA that this could get us out of the floodplain as it would be owned in the public agency, and they would have just us to deal with, not a whole bunch of individual landowners, and would therefore probably think de-designate the floodplain. Regarding, like I said, a lot of those other details it's still to be determined. We're still at concept level, and a lot of this will come out through the preliminary engineering process.
Thanks, Ken. iPhone, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, give us your question or your comment.
Hi, my name is Lauren Chapman. Understanding that the concept is that the project is still at the concept level. Two questions. Is it likely that the sewer is going to be separated so it no longer will be a combined sewer and stormwater system? And then also, is green infrastructure like the pavers that were installed in the Grandmont Rosedale area, is that also a potential to be part of this project to reduce some of that impermeable pavement and reduce some of the stormwater runoff?
I'll jump in here and I'll probably ask Sam to help out with that also. So the green infrastructure will not help at all when it comes to the times of high Great Lakes levels when the canals are overtopping and getting into the sewer system. It does help with it, to absorb precipitation level runoff. And as far as sewer separation in Jefferson Chalmers, I don't believe that any is currently planned on at this moment.
Thank you, Ken. Actually, and it's difficult to separate the stormwater from sewer in Jefferson Chalmers because of the elevations. It would require a new pump station to be constructed in that area. That being said, we are looking at some GSI options for Jefferson Chalmers. On some vacant properties, we may be able to put some rain gardens, some detention basins to help with the smaller storms, but we're not able to look at full separation at this time or as part of this project.
Thanks, Sam and Ken. So we got about 26 minutes and about 15 hands and people in the chat. So I really want to move a little bit quicker. So Mr. Curtis Burns, if you would be so kind to unmute yourself, give us your question or your comment.
Yes, good evening. Just a couple of questions. Someone was talking about the unmet needs regarding the recent floods. Could those unmet needs could be used for the seawalls in the Jeff Chalmers area? And number two, regarding the Cam Marine and Bayview Yacht Club, I understand that they're talking about putting a flood wall there. Is that something that does the city owns those two marinas now, or is that privately owned? And if so, why are we using those monies to do something private if we're not doing anything private in Jeff Chalmers regarding seawalls or flood walls?
Yeah, so I'll start with the Cam Marine Bayview Yacht Club entrance. The flood wall is just kind of a placeholder for to be determined as to what exactly could be constructed there. As a little bit of background, Great Lakes Water Authority, during the last time we had high Great Lakes levels, noticed seepage coming through and under the Connor Creek berm and installed a steel sheet pile cutoff wall that went across their frontage. And frankly, what we're probably considering is an extension of that wall so you get to the entrance of Cam Marine and Yacht Club, and then figure out from there what to do. So we have that there as a placeholder. We don't know if we're going to have to get an easement from them or whatever the solution is yet to be determined. But frankly, we just don't know at this point. I don't recall what the first part of your question was now. Sorry.
Mr. Burns, I think I just found it.
Yes.
What was your second question?
Yes, the first question was regarding these $25,000, low interest loans or grants. Could something like that be used in the Jeff Chalmers areas to help residents with their unmet needs regarding the recent floods, especially the ones that have no seawall or seawalls that are really in disrepair?
So, Mr. Burns, those monies are strictly for new homeowners for down payment assistance to purchase new homes. So, if someone wanted to purchase a home in Jeff Chalmers, they would be able to in the city of Detroit. But those particular funds are only being used to purchase homes for those homeowners, future homeowners. Ash H. John, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, give us your question or your comment. You are unmuted, but unfortunately, I cannot hear you. All right, we're going to quickly move on. Ms. Rhonda Adams, you can go ahead, unmute yourself, give us your question or your comment.
Yes, hi. I wanted to find out with the CDBG DR funding, in essence, to homeowner having already spent the money that I guess was close to coming down the line for the sewer repair. Is there a way for them to recoup that funding through that CDBGR DR? They didn't have flood insurance, but they did pay out of pocket, and thought there was a stipulation in there for that. And if so, how do they get the funding back in essence? And then that's one question. The second question is with the sewer department. The insurance, if a person has insurance, homeowners insurance, is a way also to get that repaired if you're not covered up under the income threshold, and get those funds recouped through the CDBGR too.
Okay, so both questions you had were about recouping funds that were already spent. Is that correct, Ms. Adams?
Correct.
Okay. Do we have someone from Water that can talk about that, or Nicole?
So unfortunately, we cannot reimburse individuals for expenses paid out as a result of the disaster. That is an ineligible expense for CDBG DR funding.
Thank you. Ms. Yolanda Peoples, you can go ahead and give us your question or your comment.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I want a question about the treatment facility being built on through. We already have an overflow of waste coming into our community from Grosse Pointe. We have many incidents of sewer backups, not floods, because the sewer backup is a infrastructure problem with the city and GLWA. They took over after the fake bankruptcy. So they were put in place to do this thing to make our property values go down. I want to know.
Hello?
Hello?
Go ahead, keep going, I'm sorry.
Okay. I want to know what the real problem is you're not addressing, because we don't need to be the floodplain. We didn't have a flood. So Grosse Pointe is not a floodplain anymore. They didn't go through this vigorous police show that you've given us. You are doing a dog and pony show without having any credibility of what you're doing. You already started draining our creeks already. Ashton and Jefferson, that's the start of it. It was a...
I'm sorry, Ms. Peoples, you can go ahead, keep going. Ms. Peoples, you can unmute yourself.
I need more time than the average person because I have a speech impediment. According to the ADA, you need to allow me to get more time to speak and get my words out, okay?
Absolutely, Ms. Peoples. I think you accidentally muted yourself, but go ahead. You can keep going.
Okay. So I'm saying that y'all are giving us a dollar police show with what's going on because we could easily get out of the flood plains just like Girls Point did already. We don't have to do this great shutdown and make our area more susceptible to disease and mosquito overflow. And we need running water through the creeks that runs through our neighborhood. We need not a bigger facility to treat our water. We need the facility to be updated that already exists. We need Macomb County to have their own treatment center to treat their own wastewater. All these numbers you have on this budget don't count for nothing. You are not doing anything to help us. Our property value have plummeted since the 2016. They were starting to go up. Now they are plummeting again. So I want to know what the real issue is because it sounds like a GLWA problem to me, not not neighborhood problem. You trying to take over our neighborhood cheaply and give our property value away to other people. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Peoples. We appreciate your comments. I will say this, City of Detroit property values have gone up pretty rapidly, even over cities like Miami. That has been proven even by the study for the University of Michigan. And I will also say that the down payment assistance and the things that have been allocated, this money has been allocated for, is very important. We just recently turned 400 renters into homeowners in the last year and a half. Through this down payment assistance. So I hear you, Ms. Peoples. We can definitely talk offline, get your information and have some more dialogue with you. But I just want us to be sure that we know that these monies are in the best interest of our residents and we're trying to get us the biggest bang for our buck for the allocation. Benny DeTuit, I hope I'm not butchering your name. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, give us your question or your comment.
All right, can you hear me okay? This is actually his wife, Erica.
Okay.
Okay, great. I have two questions. So the first one, I'm probably reiterating what some comments other people on the call have asked, but would increasing the residents' seawalls on the canal take us out of the flood zone?
Ken, are you there?
Yep, the short answer is no. According to FEMA, they would want a publicly owned entity to control the seawalls, much like the Alter Road seawall that is the city's responsibility to own and maintain.
And Ms. Erica, what's your second question?
My second question is where can we get more information on what the log structures are going to be, functionality, maintenance, and thresholds? And the reason I'm bringing this up is because the tiger dams were just left in residents' yards for years. So the concern for me living on the canal is that those log structures are going to be kept closed permanently if it's anything like what we saw with the tiger dams.
So short answer is if you Googled stop logs, you can see all types of different installations. Some of them are applicable to this situation, others aren't. If you can imagine garage door panels, roughly the size of a garage door panel, individually get lifted and slid into place into a holding mechanism, and those stack up to eventually make the temporary dam. And when those segments are no longer needed due to the lowering of the water levels, those would just be retrieved and stored until the next time they're used. The temporary tiger dams, those did get left out a while, and I don't have a good answer for that.
Thank you, Ken. William M. Davis, go ahead, give us your question or your comment. We're going to try to get the next 10 or 11 questions in the next 13 minutes.
Okay, my comment is this. I'm on the west side. I'm the vice president of Barton Farm Neighborhood Association. I live in the aviation subdivision, and our home prices have gone up. But I think our home prices would have went up even more if we didn't have flooding in our basements and flooding in our streets. You know, like I worked for the water department, you know, for 34 years. Our streets didn't used to flood like they do now. You know, like I say, it seems like some things are worse. Also, it should be more funds available to help homeowners that may be slightly above, you know, what y'all call the income guidelines, especially looking at city of Detroit retirees like myself. I haven't had a, increase in my pension. In fact, my pension was cut 11 years ago, and I haven't had no increase. So there's a lot of people in my group. I'm also president of a retiree group too for the city. So I think more needs to be done to help, residents that's above that. More needs to be done to help city of Detroit retirees, especially city of Detroit retirees that work for the water department. Those are my comments and questions.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Sam, did you want to speak toward that?
Yeah, real briefly. Hi, Mr. Davis. Good seeing you again. DWSD did get a $3.2 million grant to do.
All right, so I'm not going to hang around very much long and listen to them talk about the Jefferson district. But I will say this, the administration and the planning, when you look at the budget for those two, they're very high. They're very high. There's no young people who are in on these conversations, basically saying, we want to contribute to the planning. We want to be the administration. And also you can see when you look at the beginning of the video going in towards the middle, when everybody came onto the panel, who were the brokers and movers, or should I say the shakers and movers, there wasn't much inclusion of African descent. And, this being the second decade for African descent, there wasn't much inclusion. Also, when you look at the fact that, infrastructure and housing, the budgets for those two, it's just pennies, really. It's just pennies. You look at a place like Dubai, and you look at the people who come here from these, Emirate countries, who live in the aviation division. These people, they come from, countries, where they're well-to-do, they're well off. And though when you go to their communities here, in Detroit, Hamtramck, Dearborn, when you look around, you see that they don't need pretty much, nothing. They have everything. Detroiters are the ones who need everything. The west side is terrible. The east side is terrible. The people here in Detroit, they pretty much have nothing, there are some things happening, around Detroit, but it's not trickling down. It's not trickling to the people. When you look at the fact that, you have downtown, they like to say Detroit is, is booming, and they like to show parts of Detroit that's, coming together. But those districts, they're not directly impacting the whole of Detroit, where people live. Houses are being torn down, houses are being built, and, renovated and repaired. But, the time that is, needed and the time that is spent it doesn't include everyone. They could have done away with the fact that, we're welcoming people to have housing. I don't particularly care about, the people having housing, you know what I mean? Like low income housing. Like that's not the issue. The issue is, why aren't you middle class yet? You know what I mean? Like, so if you're study welcoming people to come here and, to accept forms of subsidies and, the pairing of, having a home or possibly being a homeowner one day and you're just renting, these are sad outcomes. And these programs always fail. It's just a reason to say, we're giving the administration, you know, the money that they need to run Detroit. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it leaves a sour taste in your mouth when you really look at the fact that, you know, the investment, you know, the investments are not being answered. You saw when I asked the question about the gold, and as far as the liquidity, you know, they didn't answer it. They didn't want to answer it. You see what I'm saying? They didn't want to answer it. You know, they partly didn't want to answer the first question that I asked. You know, if you have a person who is on the repair program and, you know, he or she is trying to get their home, you know, needed up, you know, and it's like, what's going to happen as far as, you know, the contractors leaving and they're only, you know, fixing part of the home and the rest of the home is like shabbied out. You know what I mean? You don't want to live there. You know, it's like, yeah, you fixed it up, you boosted the value, but it's like, it's intended for someone to sell the home, you know, after, you know, the first go round of it having been repaired. So someone else can come in there and they can buy the home at a price that you can't buy it at, and they can finish fixing it up. You know, that's unfair practice. And, you know, I think, like, you know, our people, man, we really need to, you know, be in on these meetings. You know, it wasn't a lot of people in on the meeting. A lot of people weren't asking questions. There was about 13 people left who need to ask questions. You know, that's a shame. You know, a lot of people should be in on these meetings, you know, and they should be asking questions. Because, like, if you're holding their feet to the fire, they have no other choice but to act right. You know, if you're not holding their feet to the fire, then guess what? They're not going to act right. So, you know, it's just one of those things, man. You just have to really sit back and wonder, what is it going to take for them to actually say, you know, we're going to fix District 2 up, District 3, District 7. You know, we're going to fix these other communities up. You know, you go to District 5, you know, a lot of crime is happening there. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people are coming in from other countries and, you know, they're coming into, you know, Dearborn Heights and, you know, they're leaving, you know, a lot to be unsaid. You know what I mean? You know, they're bringing their coaches here, but again, you know, the violence is coming too. You know, you look at the black communities in Detroit, you know, everybody's kind of spread out in some cases because, you know, some of the houses are being torn down, you know, and some of the communities that were together at one point in time, they're not together now. So you're seeing the violence or the crime that existed, you know, prior to, you know, 15 years ago or something like that. It's not there now. It's not there now. You know what I mean? So it's like, what are they going to do with the people who are left over in some of these communities? So again, I implore, you know, people to, you know, attend these community meetings, even if you are not in, you know, the place of Southeast Michigan. You know, if you're not in Detroit or you're not in Hamtramck somewhere, attend the meetings. You know what I'm saying? Like, ask them the question, like, why does Detroit look the way it looks in, you know, most of the neighborhoods? You know, why are white people getting most of the investments? Why are Arabs getting most of the investments? Why aren't black people getting most of the investments? These questions need to be asked. And I don't think they're being asked, you know? You know, they tried to make the meeting about, you know, what's happening on Jefferson and Chalmers. And it's like, it's other things that need to be addressed as well. You know, of course you want to see, you know, the seawall or the sea level get fixed, but hey, you know what I mean? Like, you knew what you were getting when you moved in some of these areas. You knew what came with it. You know, you knew the basement was going to be flooded. You knew if you were already staying there when the basement was flooding, you knew it was probably time to get up and leave. You know, so, you know, I hope it works out for everyone. I hope everyone, you know, kind of, you know, gets to the idea that, you know, we have to work together. You know what I mean? It just can't be a lopsided deal where some people are getting advantages and other people aren't getting advantages. We got to work together. You know, aside the programs, we have to work together, you know? And again, I want that question to be answered. You know, like, if you're going to run a city, you're going to run a town, you have a charter, you know, for either of each, you know, make sure that, you know, gold is, you know, part of that currency that's flowing inside of your communities. You know what I mean? Like make sure it's really, important to do that. You know what I mean? Like, because at best you only can get like 90% silver or something like that. And that can be like a Benjamin or like a Benjamin half or like a Kennedy half, and you can spend it in some of the stores. But that's not going to be enough, because you know what I mean. Because people, they get these forms of currency and they take them out of circulation. You know, the district manager, he never gets to see the fact that they have different currencies in a community, and maybe just maybe when he cashes, whatever currency he has, that's left over from the business, maybe there can be an exchange of value that boosts, the product or whatever is seeming in the community. Because nobody want to continue to trade with these paper notes, or these quarters, these dimes, these pennies. Nobody wants to trade with that stuff because it has no value. Yeah, it's a metal, but it has no intrinsic value. It has no medicinal value. So like they need to fix that up as well, man. And I may sound crazy or I may sound out of touch to some, but one thing I do know is that I have experience in the fact that I've been to other cities and I've seen how other cities are ran. The way that Detroit is being ran, the way that Southeast Michigan is being ran, you don't want to live in those communities. You really don't. The council members, they don't walk around the communities that they represent and see what needs to be done. They don't do it. They stay in the comforts of the town halls, wherever they are, right? The city halls. They stay in the comfort of the city hall. They don't come out and see what the people need. Like the lady was saying, her basement been flooding and it's backed up sewage that's coming into her basement. That should have been addressed. Like, this isn't like coming onto this space right here, this meeting. This isn't the place to air out the fact that, the city isn't doing what it needs to do. And she had to do that, which lets me know that the city isn't on top of its game. So you have the people who are defending the city, who work in the capacity of an administrator, they're only there for the perks and benefits. They're going to try to cover up the fact that, yeah, the city isn't addressing these concerns, So like me, I'm just ready to be like, you know what, I need to find a way where I've invested enough into, Detroit. But at the same time, maybe I just need to consider that, I won't be here long term. Maybe I need to consider the fact that I may leave one day. You know what I mean? Because like, if you come on the east side, right, and you look around, even on the west side, you just look around and you see what's happening and what's going on. You'll see, when you look on Google Maps, you'll see the communities that were, around in 2004, 2005, 2006, on up into 2025, 2013, 2019. No progress has been made as far as the infrastructure. And they've been getting relief money. They've been getting budgets to address the concerns that the communities has. A lot of people have left Detroit and went to Houston. A lot of people went to Las Vegas. A lot of people from Detroit went to Chicago. Some of them went to New York, to Miami. They've left. They went back to Alabama. They've left. So, yeah, you got the budgets and, you got money to plan and, what was that, like $2 million to plan? Like, come on now. You can go to Cass Tech High School and say, we need you all to plan ahead for the city of Detroit. It's not going to cost no $2 million. It's not. Why is there such a gap between the administrative costs and the fees for the planning? Why is there such a huge gap? Which lets me know that people are they're just printing ducats. They're just printing ducats, man. Like they're really not, like, all of this is like, an image to show. It's not something you can hold or grab or, attach to it. It's not that. It's just something to hold and show. All these PowerPoint presentations, like Let's really get out and say, let's get into the communities. Let's say, okay, this elder over here, she needs help. Her daughter is going to age in a couple years. She's going to need help. Let's make sure that, she has, home ownership. Let's make sure, the home that she's living in is completely renovated and that she's not, accepting the fact that her mother didn't have her home renovated and the home that's going to her doesn't need to necessarily go to her. Let's get them new homes. All of these should be paid for by, Medicare, Medicaid, because a lot of us are on Medicaid because we're poor. A lot of that stuff should be like paid through insurance, low cost options, insurance programs. A lot of that stuff should be paid for. You got insurance programs in cities like Detroit, they're just there to collect. They're not helping. If you have pre-existing conditions on your home, they're not going to cover it. They're not going to cover it. So if your home, you get a leak in the ceiling and it falls in, they're going to come out and, take pictures. And next thing you know, your rates are raising. You know what I mean? Like nothing has been fixed. So like my thing is this, man, like I'm not going to continue to sit here and, try to attend these meetings and listen to, the next person that's accepting an office or the next person. That's the only time you get news, right? It's when somebody accepts an office or when somebody resigns. Only time people are proud to, see the White House is doing the inaugural ball. You know what I mean? Like other than that, people don't care about, employees coming in and benefiting from the administration that came in before them. Like they don't care about that. People don't care about it. So like my thing is this, man, like Detroit is like, if you have to leave the city one day, make sure you let people know, where you're going and let them know that, there's advantages in this places. There's advantages in this places. I always tell people, whoever I talk to and we're talking about, traveling, I always tell them like, go to Minnesota, see how it is. You know what I mean? If you're just there for a week, you're probably going to like what you see. It's definitely better than Detroit. It's definitely better. And, it's also, the public safety is taken seriously in places like that too. So that's all I have to say. Great peace. Yakoki.